Welcome to the Troy Kearns podcast. We talk all things real estate, business, investment, entrepreneurship. Today I've got a very special friend, Bob Mayer. Bob, welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure to be here, Troy.
Bob, we met, I was introduced to you as somebody that could help me with tax incentives, reducing the taxes that you pay to the state on a building. And then as I've gotten to know you, not only are you an expert on incentives and knowing the political climate of Kansas City, but you're also an investor yourself.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about how you started, who you are, and where you came from.
Well, just like everybody in your audience, I didn't know a lot. So first of all, to be in real estate, you have to be like you, Troy, or me. You got to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
You got to be willing to take risks.
Right.
So I was back in dates me, but back in the late mid-'70s, I believed very strongly in civil rights, working with who's now Congressman Emanuel Cleaver in Kansas City, but I've got to know a lot of the people around the country in that arena.
Okay.
But through that, the point what I'm saying is that I decided to carve out working with, I started by, to be frank, I had no money.
Right.
I started a halfway house for women coming out of prison.
Oh, wow.
And it was the first in Missouri. On this side of the state line, on the Kansas City side, because St. Louis had one. But the point is that all things entrepreneur, it was an old Episcopal church in 58. It's in the hood. And it had been in the prime days, it was premier real estate, which is another lesson in this whole thing is you don't go for the premier real estate first out of the bat, right?
Right. We talk about that all the time. You don't buy Boardwalk, you buy Baltic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this was a beautiful old mansion, including a church that had been pretty much a minimal use. And so the Episcopal priest at that time, who was very progressive and innovative, said, "Hey, Bob, why don't you come work with me?" Well, I didn't have any money at the time. And I said, "Sure." And he wrote me a couple little checks just to keep me going.
Right.
And long story short, I learned how to talk with the city about grants, would be appropriate for a low-income area.
What is a grant?
Well,
and I'm asking not for myself, but for somebody who's never used a grant before.
Well, there are different types of grants, but this case, it was a grant to do improvements on the property, but it was for a cause.
Right.
So the cause was helping women offenders, ex-offenders. So a grant was basically where you go to a bank,
right,
of larger banks, foundations that hold money,
right,
and they're generally wealthy people that have put their money into cause, and they outline different things, like it could be for youth development, it could be for adult daycare, it could be for anything, and some actually are about historical preservation, which we'll talk about later. So this was a particular grant that I was able to get from actually a building in downtown Kansas City back in the days. It was called First National Bank, which is now the library here in town. That's a whole other conversion of it, going from a bank to a library.
Right.
But the grants basically are philanthropic, meaning people that have wealth or want to donate, put it into this, and then that donates it out to a cause. Now, in real estate, it's a little bit more difficult, and I think you and I talked about this the other day. So you can't do it as a for-profit developer or a for-profit investor, but what you can do is form a not-for-profit corporation.
Right.
And we could get in the weeds in that, but you got to look. The best thing, my advice, is talk to an attorney or talk to a tax accountant, and somebody can help you set up. You can get easily a nonprofit in Missouri or Las Vegas or Florida, wherever, but getting the state exemptions and the IRS exemptions, that's a whole nother matter.
Right.
You got to create a whole IRS creation, and that takes some time. And they've done just a good example. People probably have heard, and I'm not an advocate of them, but Scientology.
Yeah.
They're big time in Clearwater, Florida. They're big time in Las Vegas. They're got a branch here. They take all these wealthy movie stars and promise them that they're going to give them enlightenment, but where do they sink their money? I'm talking about Scientology. It's in real estate.
Right.
And you know why? Because they're tax exempt. They're under a church auspice, and I don't advocate that, but that's how they've been able to accumulate all over this country.
So what you're saying to people is if they want to not pay taxes, they need to start spreading the word?
Yeah. Well, that could be one, but or you try to figure out the best way I would describe it, it's a charitable investment, and you find an organization that might be interested, as an example, in preservation of historic buildings.
Well, that's interesting to take a deep dive on that. First of all, one of the things that I want to mention about a grant that I was kind of getting at was that a grant is like a loan, but you don't pay it back. Instead of you having to borrow the money for whatever you need, you mentioned that they're going to give you things that you have to do it for.
Right.
And if you fulfill those obligations, that money is forgivable.
That's exactly right.
So they have Pell Grants when you're going into school. They have grants from the government. They have grants, as Bob said, from banks and local foundations. But the best thing about a grant is if you're able to obtain a grant, that's free money that you don't have to pay back, that all you have to do is do what you say you're going to do. And chances are, if you do what you say you're going to do, there's more money where that came from.
Well, let me give you, absolutely. Let me give you a good example of everything you just said. I'm old enough to have done a few projects. There's a little great historic town in middle of Missouri called Booneville, named after
Daniel Boone.
Yeah, and his son settled there. And it was back in the pre-days of Civil War.
Right.
It was like, Missouri was a border state. So you had the Southerners with some plantations, and then you had some Yankees that had come in and settled. Booneville was one of the first places they did the Civil War, about skirmish before they hit the East.
Right.
But the point is that I went into this little historic town because what I do is work with incentives and opportunities for older buildings and development. They have a real interest there in historic preservation.
Right.
So what I was able to do, there was a wonderful old hotel that had been deserted, and it's called the Hotel Frederick. It was built in the 1920s and preserved, and actually they had some cool preservation lights and all that they took from some historic old Art Deco buildings in Kansas City.
Right.
The building was preserved by a guy that was just a local, call him a philanthropist, but he actually was a plumber and owned a big truck and did that kind of work, but he loved preservation like a lot of people in that town. The long story short is I went and over a period of time in a small community convinced the people that in this council that, hey, let me and my partner redevelop this building and we'll bring it back into its glory. We'll do it as a hotel, but it might be a multifamily and create a restaurant, which is what it was back in the 20s.
Right.
So one of the deals that I structured, and this was over a period of a year, building faith with the city, was I said, I need, to do this, I need basically a grant combined with a forgivable loan. So we did a combination of two where they agreed to give
two grants.
Yeah, they gave $350,000 for the facade to improve the old bricks improvements and all that. That was actually a grant that was through a facade improvement program that the city was able to do through their economic development agency. And so with any of your listeners, they ought to just look at what opportunities do cities make available for preservation of older properties.
That is an excellent segue. Bob has just told you, if you're listening right now, first of all, do us a favor, give us a 5-star review, share this video with anybody that's going to help out, and definitely subscribe because this is like episode number 53 or 54. We've put out 54 episodes all geared to help you succeed in real estate. And if you're brand new and you haven't invested in real estate, or maybe you have, I really didn't learn about all this stuff until recently. And what Bob is basically telling you guys is there's a whole nother bucket of money that you can go and put your hand in if you're willing to play ball and willing to be patient and willing to work with the city officials. And that goes back to one of my heroes, Stephen Roth, the owner of Miami Dolphins. He's always said, if you're in business with the city, you're in good business. If you're doing what they want to see done, you're going to be a trusted resource, a trusted ally, and you're going to make them look good or make them look bad. And they're going to always want to work with the people that make them look good. And goes back to one of the most important lessons that I continue to learn. And everybody says you don't make the same mistake twice, but I disagree. It's not about what you know. It's about who you know.
That's part of the network and how well you know them, or how well you deliver on what you say.
Right.
So the other part of that story is that the other side of the 350 was a forgivable loan. And the way it was structured was, okay, if you guys complete the restoration of this historic hotel within 5 years,
right,
each year will forgive amount of that 350.
Right.
We completed it in 3 years, and so there was a forgivable loan that it was zero interest at that point, but we delivered what we said. Back to your point, you know, we did a lot of things to create the well-being of the community. We had forums, we had people come into the old hotel. Remember, this was kind of a place where people got married back in the day.
Right.
They had their weddings, they had their family gatherings after church, all that. So, you know,
is it still functioning?
Actually, it is functioning very well.
So if I want to stay at this hotel,
I would recommend it because we did it's called the Hotel Frederick. It's almost, you go basically from Kansas City, you take I-70 east,
right,
and it's an hour and a half from here, and then you go across the Missouri River. You're in Columbia, where the University of Missouri is.
Right.
So it's in a great.
I've got a cousin who lives there.
Okay, so it's good, but it's on the. There's a thing called the Katy Trail in Missouri, which goes from St. Louis all the way to Kansas City. Boonville is a big part of that Katy Trail. This place is, you walk in, it's like history of 1920.
What can you do on the Katy Trail?
Bicycle.
So I could ride my bike.
Or walk.
I could ride my bike or walk from Boonville to St. Louis.
Yeah.
How long would it take me on bike?
You know, I haven't done it. I can tell you that go from Boonville to Columbia is about, by bike, it's about 2 hours.
Oh,
and
so
the way
it's not
you do that, what it was an old railroad.
Yeah.
Called the Katy Railroad, and a philanthropist named, nationally, people might know his name, Edward D. Jones. He owned the Edward Jones Investment.
yeah, he's from
St.
Missouri.
Louis.
Yeah,
He's from St. Louis. He donated the money to buy that old railroad, and the state, along with preservationists, basically turned it into a gravel area for bikers. And you can now bike almost to Kansas City and down to Sedalia, Missouri, but it's a great tourist draw. When in the summer when it's this hot, maybe not so unless you do it at night. You can do it all times.
Yeah,
but in the fall and the spring, it's great.
So let's kind of go into some of the projects that you've done and where you're at in your career right now and what you're doing. So first of all, when I met you, you were very generous with your time and you toured me into a really cool couple buildings that you did in Midtown here.
Right.
That you're partnered with some pretty high-level achieving people.
Correct.
Can we talk a little bit about those projects?
Sure. You know, so one of the things to back up to that history, like how did I get to be, I told you that early story of Boonville, but years ago in the 90s, I was appointed the chairman of the Tax Increment Finance Commission of Kansas City, which is an economic incentive tool. It's all over the nation, but here in Kansas City, and I became an expert in that. Previous to that, I've been in community development work and so on. It's always been kind of my niche. But so my point is that after that public side of my career, I went to the private side. And I formed my own company called MR Capital Advisors in about 2000, and the whole...
What's the MR stand for?
Mayor Robert, or Mr. Capital.
That's what, because I was thinking it was Mr. Capital. I was like, I like that.
Well, a lot of my buddies, they say, oh, Mr. Capital's coming, you know, but I'm not saying that I'm a big billionaire.
He's got money coming out of his pockets. We're going to shake him up after he leaves the studio here.
But I'm saying, you know, it's all about mentoring and building, you know, connections and investment and doing what you say, and then you make some profit off of that.
Right.
But back to your question, you know, basically, you know, through that career and that ability, I got to know a lot of the major corporate and institutional and real estate entrepreneurs of Kansas City.
Right.
And this has been over 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So the particular guys we're talking about, one guy was from Denver. You know, it's kind of interesting, and this is probably like you, Troy, you're from out, is people come to Kansas City and they're surprised that, well, man, why should I get into Kansas City? And they find out that, gee, you got all these great old buildings, you got historic buildings, you've got a lot of some corporate companies that have been here. And it's a good place to not just raise a family, but it's a good place to make a living.
Yeah, I think
you probably found that.
I think that one thing that most people do not know about Kansas City, and I could go back to when I was first investing here and really get clear in my mind. Like, I didn't know when people would ask me, well, what part is Kansas? What part is Kansas, Missouri? I was like, I don't freaking know. But now I can definitely tell you that, like, hey, the bad part of Kansas City is the Kansas side. Like, if you're talking about the city, like Kansas has nothing going for it, right?
Well, I won't say that.
I'm going to say that. I know you're probably not, but right now, it's not the place that you're going to bring people. If you're going to bring people to come and show them Kansas City, you're showing them Kansas City, Missouri.
Right.
But the funny part about...
Which people get confused about.
Yeah, but so like if you're looking at Kansas City, the city on the news, you're seeing Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County, Missouri. And then the funny part of that is but all of the money in all the suburbs is in Kansas.
That's true.
So
a lot of the wealthier, like Johnson County.
Yeah, Johnson County is one of the wealthiest communities in the country.
5 in the country.
And they've got the highest building standards. They've got a lot of entrepreneurs. And so what I will tell you is when I first came to town here, what we were just looking at is straight real estate investing. We're like, all right, we can buy these houses in the East, right, for $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, put some money into them and rent them out for $800 to $1,000 a month and keep going and do that. And then what we didn't count on was that people like yourself were going to be available to talk to us, that the Midwest is really like, people are nice. Like, I think coming from the West Coast, if you're on the West Coast right now, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody gets in their garage, they shut the door, and you never talk to your neighbor. Here, I know all of my neighbors. Like, they've all been over to my house, and, you know, I can, like, when I was out of town in Europe, which, as you know, they had the big rain, I guess, like an inch in like freaking 10 minutes.
Right.
And my neighbors called me. They're like, hey, your septic system is going off. You want me to go shut it off for you? Like in Vegas, they would let my house burn down.
Yeah.
You know, and so it just goes to show you that. So that was one thing I didn't count on. And then like people kept saying exactly what you said is like, hey, it's a great place to raise a family. Well, our kids absolutely love it out here. And the other thing that we didn't count on is that my wife was actually going to love it. Like she never thought that she would live. You haven't been out to my house. I'll have to have you over there. But we live in the country.
No, you showed me pictures.
Yeah, and so she's a city girl. Never thought like, oh, I'm going to enjoy actually having peace and quiet.
Right.
And she loves it.
Yeah. No, you're right. Everything you said is exactly right. People take it by surprise because not only is it a more family-oriented town, but it's also got a lot of history to it, and it had in the days and continues to have it was the number 2 rail spur in the country next to Chicago. So, you know, you go back all in the era of the Pendergasts. We have great jazz, great blues, and now, of course, we have a Super Bowl champion football team, which everybody in the country knows about.
And I knew that was the reason I came here. Do you know that?
No, because of the Chiefs?
100%. Mm-hmm. The reason that I invested in Kansas City is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
I was watching him play the Colts on Monday Night Football, and I'd looked at Indianapolis, I had looked at all these other markets. I was looking for a place to sell the existing assets I had in Vegas and to go all in on. Mm-hmm. I wanted to double up my cash flow. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how am I going to double my cash flow? I got to go to another market where the houses are cheaper and I got to buy more of them. And I'm like, so we had gone to Indianapolis. I'm watching Monday Night Football. And I told my wife, I'm like, hey, it's Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look at this kid right here. I was like, I'm looking at the city now because of him. And
so are a lot of people.
So are a lot of other people.
He's a young guy who's brought a lot of people around, and he's very entrepreneur. He's invested in sports teams.
The Royals,
and his wife, the KC Current, which is the first women's, one of the first women's soccer teams, and they're building the first women's exclusive soccer stadium here by the riverfront, which is another conversation about how the Missouri River for years was undeveloped, and now it's just going gangbusters. I'm going to say this to you. I had Brian Platt on. I've had some other people on. Mm-hmm. What would be the ultimate play would be for us to bring a hockey team or a basketball team here or develop that riverfront. Wow. The long term is develop the riverfront.
But you know where it is? It's right on that airport. Right where that airport
Yeah,
is.
the old downtown airport, which is also convenient.
Just knock that whole thing down, put every stadium that you got, funnel them all into downtown, end of story.
Right. And that's, of course, like every city, they're trying to figure out whether it's Vegas or Miami, they want to put, more and more the secret is put your baseball stadiums, and for that matter, football, which you can. Football needs a lot more space. But you put them in the downtown area where you can build amenities around them, right? Retail. So that's exactly what, when I was one of the early advocates of Kansas City Riverfront back in the 1980s. We had it on the ballot, and it won a little bit. It lost, actually, to put a little bit of sales tax into it. But ultimately, we created the Port Authority, which is another incentive tool. The Port Authority is it's created by statute in the state of Missouri, and other cities. Ohio has anywhere by rivers has port authorities.
Interesting.
And the port authorities have ability to sanction incentives if they're done within the confines of that area. So the riverfront has all these kinds of incentives where you can get, like, if you're in a riverfront or an industrial area, you can get potentially 25 years of abated taxes.
Okay, let's break into that, because if you're listening right now and you're not familiar with abated taxes you're not alone. Because it's a complicated word, but what does it mean, Bob? What does abated taxes mean?
Well, okay, so what it means is that everybody knows they have to pay the man. You got to pay property tax.
You got to pay taxes
to the city, to the county, to the state, and ultimately to the feds. But mainly your property. When you own real estate, that's who the breakout is. There's city, and there's all the subparts of that tax. Then there's this county, in this case Jackson County, and then there's the state of Missouri. So
out of my property taxes, and what are property taxes rated on here? How much are they in Missouri?
The millage
Yes.
is probably around, I'm not as current, but I think it's to about 8%.
So 8% on the assessed value of the property.
Yeah.
So
well, that's just the millage, and then you got the taxing, and then you might layer some special incentives on it. I mean, like, for instance, the streetcars, stuff like that.
So what he's saying is that basically the tax bill, it has a formula, and then there might be some other junk fees on top of that.
Right.
That you're going to have to pay no matter what, because like when you vote for a referendum and the streetcar is free, but it does cost the taxpayers money, so you better use it because it's there whether you use it or not. But for instance, on this building, my taxes per year are about $200,000, right? And so to probate those taxes, what would you do?
Well, okay, so first of all, to get without the weeds, so if your property right now, because it used to be a bank,
Right.
and all this, and you're going to convert it ultimately to what I'll call mixed use, multifamily,
Right.
the definition on taxation for residential is a lot less than it is for commercial.
Right.
So you want to ultimately show that you can't just say I'm going to do it. You got to demonstrate and get the permit and all that stuff. I'm working on a project right now exactly on this thing where we're trying to convert it to residential. Usually some of the taxing districts like the county don't want to do that until after you've shown that you've got your certificate of occupancy, that you've actually done it. But if you can make the case that it's been vacant for several years and the building's blighted, what you're saying is, I want to not only reduce my taxes because it was a bank building and they were paying a lot more, but now it's vacant for the most part with a few little tenants left, and we're going to convert it to residential. So therefore, what I want to initially do is I'm going to put in X amount of money to improve this property, right? I want to freeze my taxes at the base of what they are today. But back to my point, if it's not classified correctly, I mean, it's commercial as opposed to residential, you want to get it reclassified as residential sooner than later. So that's a whole process of going through a bunch of the legal formalities, submissions, all that kind of stuff to do it. But what it does, so back to your point, if I'm going to spend in this building that currently I paid X amount of dollars, let's just say hypothetically I paid $4 million for it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to convert these top floors to residential and I'm going to spend $10 million.
Right.
So I've got now $10 million invested. So I don't want the county to assess me and say, oh, I've got a $14 million value, right? You want to say, no, I want you to freeze my taxes at the current base, and that even though it'll be valued more, it should only be valued at $4 million for at least the next. And different states have different longevity. In Missouri, you can do it 10 years, you can do it 15 years.
So it's statute.
It's statutory, and you could do it under tax increment financing potentially up to 23 years.
All right, so I'm going to do some rapid fire questions that I have because I think these will really help if you're listening right now and you're trying to invest. And one of the cool things I want to let you know, if you're listening right now and you've made it this far, first of all, we've hired Bob for this property, which I'm doing, for the historical tax credits, which I'm going to get into right now. But I've also partnered with one of Bob's partners, and he'll be helping us do our incentive work for another property that we're actually looking to raise capital on right now. So if you're on the outside looking in and you've got money but you don't have time and you want to be a part of a project and get tax deferred wealth and ownership in a project, DM me through Instagram the word fund and we'll get a hold of you. But it's an awesome time. And the reason it's so cool is because, as you can tell, we've got experts like Bob who are helping us reduce the costs of the building. This all breaks down to what is known as the net operating income. Because the lower the taxes are at, the higher the value of the building is at, right? So if Bob goes and he gets the taxes down and frees to be a $4 million tax rate, and now the building's revitalized and it's worth $30 million, but it's still taxed at $4 million, that trickles down to what the NOI is. And how do you derive value in real estate and commercial real estate? It's the cap rate divided by the NOI, which equals the value, right? And so we'll take that and say, all right, 5, 6, 7%, whatever that cap rate is and whatever that formula looks like. And I might have said the math backwards, but I always have to go and look at it every time I'm doing it. But the bottom line is that boils down to the NOI. Where Bob and where everybody else, if you're in anywhere that doesn't have historical tax credits, you need to pause and rewind and listen again and again, because this is where things get really crazy. Through historical tax credits, you are able, depending on the state, each state is different, as Bob said, but in Missouri, able to get up to 45 cents on your dollar in tax credits. So if you bought a property for $1 million and you had to do $100 million in rehab, you could get $45 million back. Now, what he just mentioned before, earlier in the show, when he talked about he was the board chair for the
Tax Increment Finance Commission of Kansas
City.
Right.
So something that was completely foreign to me until I moved to Kansas City, which is called TIF financing. So the bank will then say, hey, you got those tax credits approved. We'll loan you money on the amount that you have approved. And so what they will do is they'll loan you money based on the money that you're getting, or you can sell from the state, because you can actually sell those tax credits.
Well, that's historic credits. Yes, you can.
Yeah, you can't sell what he was just talking about, but on historical tax.
So in Missouri, the state credits, and you're right, everything you said is correct. Like, for instance, Missouri was one of the most innovative in the country, where they actually started a state credit, opposed to another state I spend some time in, which is Florida. Florida does not have a state credit, but the entire country has a federal preservation credit,
right,
which is approximately 20%.
20%.
And so you combine that, and if you have a place like Missouri where you can get 25 cents on the dollar, you're right, you got 45 cents. In Florida, you can only get 20 cents.
Did you ever want to invest in real estate? Did you ever want to live the life of your dreams? Did you want financial freedom? Did you want to break the generational curse? Did you want to help your parents out? Did you want to help your mom out? Maybe you work for a job that you don't like. You know, they say there's only one reason to work a job, and that's to learn, right? If you're not learning at your job, you're just going through the motions, right? We have a free Facebook group, the Millionaire Mentorship Facebook group for real estate investing. Make sure you join. The link is in the description. If you want to schedule a free call with me and my team and you actually want to start, I would suggest you do so. We have helped hundreds of people change their lives, and all they had to do was get started. They booked a call with me and my team, and they got the ball rolling. And I'm so confident that if you don't get your first or next investment property within the first 90 days, you don't pay, and I'll give you $1,000 cash. That's how confident I am. Obviously, you got to take action. You can't just do nothing and expect that to happen, but that's life. Life's all about taking action. Make sure you give this podcast a 5-star review, share it with a friend, and take action. So let's break this down, folks. Imagine you have a money partner, but it's the state. You can get most of your rehab paid for. And I think we actually met at this fundraiser. Not met, but one of the times that we ran into each other was at the Cats.
Yeah, which is a historic building.
Which is crazy, because if you look at this property, I know a lot of people are thinking, like, I got to go in there, I got to be like a freaking anthropologist and start polishing stuff, but they literally kept all the walls on Cat's Bakery. That's it. Everything else is brand
Everything
new.
is brand new. Yeah.
That might be one where you're buying a property for $1 million and you're doing $100 million renovation.
Exactly.
So can you explain how those work for people?
Well, on the credits, you're talking about the description of how you combine that?
How you combine them, how you get them, how you sell them, and how you use them.
Yeah, okay. So generally what states around the country and the feds want, and again, these are things, I could get deep in the weeds, but we don't have the time. But what I will tell you is that once you identify a building, and here's the other little adage, I used to fall in love with historic buildings, and I still love them, but to me, they're a piece of real estate, so you fall in love enough to make them look quality, and then you also realize that, hey, I want to sell that and move on to the next project.
Right.
So it's an investment vehicle. But to answer your question, you start by identifying, the property, and then you make sure that the building has been put on, or you have to put it on, the historic tax rolls of that state. And what that means is that, so I have this great old, like your building here. This building was a great old thing called Peck's, and it was a grocery / downtown store, I think apartment store back in its days. So so it's very important that you keep the integrity of the exterior in shape, and that's critical because you have to meet what's called QREs, qualified rehabilitation expenses.
Right.
You can't just, back to your point. If I can keep the facade and keep it historic, and I could work on putting brand new inside, you're not necessarily eligible to get reimbursement for all those modern amenities. But what you are eligible is, for instance, if you've put in and you keep the windows and preserve the windows, and you have to spend money to upgrade them, you find the old underneath carpet and floors. We tended in the 60s to cover everything up, including on the exterior, but also on the floors. So you find these great old wood floors, right? You take up the carpet and you can restore those floors, and that would be a qualified reimbursable expense. You uncover a great old mural, or in the case in Boonville, we had these great old historic Art Deco lamps that came out of Kansas City in the 1920s. They were still intact. All that with improvements, with electrical, so forth, allowed us to get reimbursable expenses.
Pretty much everything construction related, though, right?
Well, construction related to the historical preservation.
Right. To put the property back together,
Yeah.
you're going to need X number of dollars.
And so,
Well, let's talk about the Netherlands. That's one.
Yeah, that's one. That was
What was the rehab on that?
Oh, it cost probably, the rehab on that was probably about 18 million.
18 million bucks. That was inexpensive at the time.
Yeah.
Because what would it cost you now to do that?
Oh, that building is over
40?
50 easily.
50 now. And you guys just did that how many years ago?
About 5 years ago.
5 years ago, it would have cost you 18. Welcome to 2023. It's going to cost you 50 million bucks.
Exactly.
And so out of the 18 million bucks that you guys cost you to rehab, were you able to get 45 cents on the dollar of that 18?
Absolutely.
Right. And so were you able then to sell that to...
Absolutely. We sold. So in Missouri, there's a big interest, and this would be across the country. There's certain banks that will be, in this case, it's local banks that are Missouri-based, like Commerce Bank.
Commerce Bank.
But then you have a national bank like U.S. Bank that's all over the country. They in different markets are interested in both affordable tax credits, but historic credits too.
So they'll buy a tax credit because they can go and pay you 90 cents on the dollar.
Right. It's a competitive thing, and you can play different banks to see who's going to give you the highest amount. I've been able to get 94 cents on some projects with a certain bank because they wanted to win that competition. So you don't just do it with one bank, you do it with a couple.
Bob, are you the muscle?
Am I the muscle? You mean the person that works to help leverage the banks or the different? Is that
No,
what you
I
mean?
just mean that, like, one thing I was mentioning this to Caleb, and who's one of Bob's business partners, and also somebody he consults with, and I said something, and he's like, "No, Bob's a pit bull," and I said, "I know." I said, I like, because if you're looking at you, you look like a sweet, just a sweet guy, right? And not that I'm sweet on you or anything like that, but maybe I am. No, I'm just kidding. So,
no, you got a beautiful wife. I do too.
Yeah. So what the case would be is, like, I don't think
No, I get it.
a lot of people don't see you coming, but you like. I told Danny, I said, you ransacked, I said, I was going to go play golf, but Bob's got me pinned down from 11 till 3 because you've got one of the attorneys coming in, we're having lunch together, and
Right.
you make stuff happen.
Well, I'm very much like a guy that I like to make it happen. You're right, and I like to make sure that I don't leave too much away the wayside. You know, it's kind of the early bird gets the worm, right?
Right.
It's all about going after it, and that's one of the problems. A lot of people just, oh man, I'll get to it when I can get to it.
Right.
I'd rather get it done. It's like the comedian. What was his name? That Get Her Done. You
Get
know?
her done! I don't remember Rodney Dangerfield.
No. He's Larry the Cable Guy.
Yeah.
He was a great guy. Yeah, get her done, man.
Right.
That's what I'm about, is a get her done type guy.
You're Larry the Cable Guy of tax increment financing.
Yeah, there you go.
Get her done!
That's it. That's me. You got it.
Well, that's cool. So if somebody's listening to you right now, and they're like, okay, I'm interested, and let me just tell you, you don't have to do this on major developments. You can do this on
Right. Smaller too.
small stuff too. In fact, I have a friend of mine who was on the podcast, Megan Duma. She can tell you she's doing one in the Gladstone area. Not Gladstone,
She's
but
doing a preservation house.
Preservation House. Do you know about her?
I do.
Okay, cool. So Megan's a good friend of mine, and I've known her for a long time. She's doing one of those, and she was telling me how she rolls her attorney's fees in there. She rolls a lot of stuff to get that money back. So we actually had done several federal tax credit deals in New Orleans, Louisiana. So if you're listening to this, you're like, well, how do I get involved? Just pay attention and apply, because
Right.
if you can get your rehab money paid, or a portion of your rehab money paid, you brought down your cost of construction.
No, absolutely. It's part of the game. And you know what? Here's the thing around the country. I mean, the old industrial belt, I'm talking Pittsburgh, Cleveland, where I grew up, Akron, go over to West Virginia. Every town in this country has historic older buildings. Many of them have been torn down, sadly.
Right.
But the ones that are there, and people look at them, oh my God, that's a shithole. You know what? Shitholes make money.
Shitholes make money.
And it's all about preservation, and that's what I've carved that niche. Caleb, he's an architect partner. He knows how to design them. I know how to basically pull the partnerships with the city,
It's a great
banks, and the whole thing. And that's how you then really make those things happen. And you're doing a good thing for the community at the same time. You're preserving history of that town.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. In fact, when we came out here, that's exactly what we wanted to do. And I plan on doing a lot more of them. And that's why it made sense to partner with you guys, because, when you look at it, you're like, all right. And me and Caleb sat down and had that conversation the other day because we were talking about raising funds. I was like, well, I don't really see myself as just a fun guy. I'm usually hands-on. He's like, well, where do you see yourself in this deal? And I was like, good question. I am not. I'm like, I've never done a freaking, 100,000 square foot rehab on a commercial building. I've done hundreds upon hundreds of regular houses.
Right.
And so I think that sometimes when people say, well, I want a partner, and I'm like, why are you partnering? And they're like, well, and the reality would be they're scared, right? But like, for me, I believe you should always have strategical partnerships.
Exactly.
Because to partner with someone, just to partner with somebody is not a good thing.
Not a good thing. You bring people that each have a different skill, like your example, this guy, Caleb, he's got architectural skill and some development knowledge. I have finance and, tax credit and incentive and know how to work municipalities, and because I've been part of them, and public-private partnerships. That's a big common thing.
Right.
And then you got to have somebody that's willing to, additionally, everybody puts some skin in the game, but somebody's got to be what we call the preferred equity investors. Maybe like you just pointed out, they got some money around and they want to they want to use it and put it to work, and so they can get a special return on their. I mean, look at it in the stock market, and you never know how much money's being taken out by the boys in Wall Street. But the reality is, you can have more control, and you can have a nice, shiny building that you can point to and say, "Hey, I was a part of that."
Yeah, it's really cool. If you're somebody who, you're investing in the stock market, have a high tax income. The other thing about real estate is, and this is why, all of the guys who have lots of money invested in real estate, it doesn't matter if they're, and I want to circle back to the guys who develop Power and Light, the Cornishes, and you could talk about how a private-public partnership and how well those can work. But when you get to the point where, you can start providing value for people, like, they're going to invest with you.
Exactly.
And because I've had a lot of people raise their hand to me, hey, if you got something going on, I'm interested. And then I'm like, well, I'm not interested in bringing you into a deal that I'm doing, like a flip in Stillwell, Kansas, or a flip in Prairie Village, or a flip here.
There's a limited amount of money there.
Well, you just small deal, right?
That's right.
So when I'm looking at this stuff, I'm like, all right, Caleb and I are starting on a deal. So we're going to do a deal. We're going to bring in equity partners, and we're going to start with a small one just to get rolling. But then after a while, I'm going to want to do a lot of these bigger deals as we, curry with more investors and we raise more capital. It's not unrealistic to look at Kansas City to see where it's going and say, hey, let's go buy the Federal Reserve building that the guy who owns it right now is never going to finish it.
Right.
And let's go buy that. And
I worked on that project on the incentive side.
Oh, good. Can I ask some questions? Okay. So you know David Roos?
I do. I don't know him. I know the previous owners that sold it to him, and I know of him, yeah.
Okay.
And I know quite a bit about that project.
So just knowing that the Federal Reserve building on 925 grand was bought for how much?
Well, so originally, I believe it was the Federal Reserve sold it to a previous developer who bought it for a hell of a deal, probably about $10 million.
He bought it for about $10 million.
And then the guys that bought it from him, because he couldn't do it, it was too big, and long story short, sometimes developers get a little bit ahead of themselves.
Right.
He invested in other projects in Omaha and some other places, so he lost this. So
he lost it.
Yeah, basically one of the investors in the project who had invested $2 million in
took it over
for $2 million. He took over a building that was probably in its day easily worth $30-40 million. When the federal government leaves a property or a bank like this bill, they leave them in pretty good shape.
Absolutely.
And so that building was left in tremendous shape. But then that particular developer who I worked with, and we got incentives, which still exist on that building, tax increment financing, for 23 years. And the idea was convert it to residential with a big hotel emphasis. And this David Ruth, the guy you mentioned, I don't know him, but I know that
Niles, Michigan.
Yeah, and he had some money, and he bought out these other guys. And I don't know what the price was, but I basically think they sold it for what they had in it. I think they sold it for like $3 to $4 million. So they made a little money because they had spent money to put the TIF in place. They hired guys like me and an attorney who's an expert in it and so on. Together, we put that deal together for him. So he has it, but it's now sat, as
for
you know,
8 years.
Yeah, and clearly they don't have the capital to do that project. And time is money. And I know they had a signed agreement, for instance, with Sheraton to do a special, Hilton, to do a special kind of design Hilton on that property. I'm sure that's gone away. You could probably recreate it sometime, but since that time, Troy, there's a lot of other little buildings that are historic that have been converted to hotels downtown Kansas City. So how many of those do you want to put in the place? Yeah,
you can't, and this is funny. I followed this gentleman's career. And it just will tell you, this is, a lot of the guys who get into syndications are money guys. They understand money, they understand financing, they understand the deal, they understand how to structure it, they understand how all the pieces work, but they've never managed a contractor.
That's right.
They've never done a deal in real estate, actually. But they know how to, the numbers make sense, right? And so they get into these deals, and they get into these cities, and they don't live here, and they're not hands-on, and they end up going under. And if you go and you follow this guy's career, because I always like, okay, if you're trying to buy a deal, you want to find out what this guy's career about so you can go and be relatable to whoever you're talking to. And as I follow this guy's career, I'm like, okay, he has been doing LIHTC, which is
low income tax credit.
Which is low income tax credits. He worked with a company, and I think he was the guy who put the money together. And then
But he never was hands-on.
Was never hands-on. So he owned a deal in Jacksonville, Florida, and he owned this deal, which he bought about the same time. The one in Jacksonville, Florida, they literally blew up the building. Somebody bought it from him after he sat on it for 8 years, and then the city blew it up. And I think...
Probably condemned it.
Yeah, the same thing is going to happen here.
Well, I hope not, because that building has, again, a lot of historical... It's easily a historic building. It was built back in the 20s, and it's a great old building. And the Pickwick, which is right next to it, which is a great old historic, I was representing those guys, and they finished that project, and they were really counting on these guys to finish that project, because otherwise you got kind of a vacuum. You got that one great project, the Pickwick, but it's not enough. You have to create the other way with the hotel would have been a great synergy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great opportunity, and I don't know where the guy's at, but they got some big...
I do. I can tell you right now.
Tell me.
Well, it's simple. People always say, I don't know where the guy's at. Well, prior to March, he had about $1 million in liens on the
That's
property.
what I was just gonna say.
He cleaned
and he
up
had a bank loan.
And he cleaned that up, and I believe he cleaned it up to sell it. Why else would you clean it up?
Yeah, that's probably right.
And so he's in Niles, Michigan. I have contacted him. He has not responded, which would be weird, because you'd think if somebody's interested in buying it, you're going to talk to him, especially if you're not finishing it. And I could tell you, no matter who it is, there's buildings like this all over the town, and it's all over every town, of guys who just don't know how to finish a job.
Right. And that building has had such a checkered, I mean, you've now had 4 different developers touch that building.
Right.
And each of them has failed.
Yeah. Well, how big is it?
The Federal Reserve?
Yeah.
It's about the size of this, but a little bigger.
No, about 300,000 square foot.
Yeah, it's about, because it has a couple adjacent buildings connected to it.
Well, I think just the immediate one.
Yeah. Well, the immediate, then you have a couple other, but yeah, it's
You got parking too?
You got parking, you got a garage that needs some work, but it's a garage, and it's got these old cool bank vaults that are never going to be moved, but they have history to them.
Yeah.
And you could qualify that as part of the redevelopment for historic tax credits.
Right.
So, and you got already in place, even though it could probably expire, you have a TIF plan in place that you could use to help leverage, the money in order to bring down to do the investment.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So if somebody's listening right now and they're trying to get started in real estate, what tips would you give them?
Well, the first tip I'd give is never go alone. Meaning, I would suggest that you, I'm interested in real estate. Why don't you try to find someone you can mentor with who is already there? I'll give you an example. And I have a friend who's now, I won't say his name, but his name is on a number of buildings downtown here and other places. He started when he figured out, I want to be in real estate at the age of 16.
Right.
So what did he do? He went to the biggest developed group here in Kansas City at that time, which was back in the 60s and 70s, which was called Leo Eisenberg Company. Leo's Eisenberg Company was doing all these major commercial buildings. They were doing industrial. He said, I want to volunteer. I just want to mentor in my after school and in my summer. And he learned how to basically pull deals together by being with the deal makers who were doing it at the age of 16 to 18. Then he went on to college, and he got that, he specialized in, first of all, you ought to know your numbers and math, but he wasn't an accountant. He specialized in real estate and economic development. And then he came back to Kansas City, and he started basically doing real estate management and commercial.
So get a mentor.
Get a mentor. That's the first step. That's how you do it.
Well, amazing that you mentioned this. I'm going to give a plug, not a shameless plug, but we actually have a program called the Millionaire Mentorship Program.
I see it right up
there. Where we actually teach guys exactly how to do that. And we've got now a year under our belt of success after success, and it's been really cool. Because when I started it, you don't see the successes. And I knew that I could teach people how to do it because I've taught other people how to do it. But we have several people that I've helped in Kansas City that are going to make 6 figures their first year in this program. High six figures. Like one guy's flipping a property right now, and I don't even know where it is. It's called like something. It's in Jackson County, but it's just one of those small towns in Jackson County. And he's going to make like $90,000 on that first deal.
Yeah. And that, that's better than working on an hourly wage, right? Or even at 90,000, that's a good job to have a 90,000 year income. But if you take that 90, right, and then you leverage it and you build a relationship with investors and a bank to say, okay, now I know I can do that, so I'm going to go on to a bigger property. I'm going to go on, like you did, I'm going to go on an armor to a historic boulevard and buy a fourplex, multifamily, whatever, smaller.
31 unit?
Yep. So you start smaller and you start building that thing out. You realize what you can do, and it's all about pyramiding your success. But the big thing, the other tip is, I would say that people should never extend themselves beyond what they can do. Because I've seen too many developers through the years, big and small, that they say, oh, I did this, I'm successful, I made my 90,000. So then I say, I'm going to go do 90, I'm going to go buy this property, this property, and they spread themselves
too thin.
And then, so you got to stair step it.
I agree. I think that's great advice. One thing I see people do too much is they have one win, they turn it into two, they start going crazy. I've seen other guys do this where they get into everything, and the next thing you know, they're losing money over here, and they fold up shop, and then they disappear. And then they never hear about them again.
That's right. They say, well, I guess I just wasn't meant to do that.
It's funny, and that's what I judge success by, is I judge success as how you go from one failure to the next. Because I've failed plenty of times. I'm sure you have too. And what do you learn? You learn the most from your failures.
You do. You're absolutely, that's another good lesson. You learn and you also learn where your strengths and where your weaknesses are.
Right. Where's your biggest strength?
Well, I think my biggest strength is I'm able to bring together a collaboration of partners.
Right.
From both the finance side, from the government side, from the private sector side, and from the development world. And, so for me, over the years, it's helped me become president of the Board of Commercial Realtors. It's, your words are bond, in essence. You got to deliver what you say. And I had the opportunity when I was chairman of this citywide agency, when you mentioned the Cordish project, long before that, there was a wealthy billionaire that started AMC Theaters, Stan Durwood, who had the original vision of the Power and Light. And Stan came to our board and said, look,
who's David Bain in relation to Stan Durwood? I thought David Bain was also associated with AMC.
Yeah, yes, but Stan was the founder.
Okay.
And started it in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
In small screens. David Bain, I believe, was one of the developer investors that after Stan died, when Kay Barnes was mayor, and Kay and Stan had a special friendship. But, again, that was a big case in point to attract capital and investment. The sad thing is Stan's vision, he has now been accomplished by these guys from Baltimore that came in, Cordish, and they've done this in other cities all over the United States. If anybody's listening from Miami, from Baltimore, from LA.
They're out of Baltimore, right?
Yeah. No, they're still there. They might have sold that investment.
No, but I mean, they live in...
Oh, they're based in Baltimore. Yeah, they did the Ballpark Village in St. Louis.
They did that?
They did that.
That's a beautiful development.
It's a partnership and that's where Lowe's is in that investment. I've stayed there.
Yeah.
But that's my whole point. People look at, you come through all these by learning experiences, and yes, failures, the smart business guy, the smart real estate guy learns from the failure of whatever they did to go and do the next deal. I learned, we succeeded in that little hotel historic in Boonville. The mistake, it wasn't a mistake, that's the other thing, is timing's everything.
Right.
The banks, you remember what happened in 2006, 2007?
Yeah.
There was a meltdown in the economy through the banks, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So we had a bank that was based in Missouri. It's called Union Planters Bank, that sold itself to Regions Bank, which is in the South. And so the guy that was the president of that Central Missouri Bank, he was basically fired or moved on. That was my bank loan.
Oh, man.
I went to hell, and but what did I do? I went with my partner at that time. We went and we found some private investors that were willing to help bridge us till we could get the point of getting the property enough that would leverage to get a bank loan, which is exactly what we did.
Nice.
But it took a period of time, and you learn that, and I've been in the banking arena. So I worked at GMAC Commercial Mortgage, which is now called Berkadia. But I learned from real estate how you finance these structures and what works and what doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. You got to tell a story with the paper, through the pro forma, and they got to trust that you know what you're doing. It's about the borrower, and he's the race car, and whoever the driver is the borrower, and the race car is the app of how you do it. Bob, do you have anything else to add that could help somebody who's trying to get started investing in real estate, or maybe somebody who's currently investing in real estate and maybe they're hitting the wall? Anything to kind of wrap things up with?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would always say there's always walls in whatever project.
Right.
The question is, you have to persevere to be entrepreneurial enough and creative enough to say, okay, I've hit this wall. I need to go to somebody who has done this kind of, even on a house.
Right.
Who can I go to? What contractor, what advisor? You've learned from a friend to a friend, and find somebody that's willing to give you the time.
Right.
That is a key, so that you can then learn those lessons, and then through that, and maybe, by the way, you say, okay, I started on this duplex.
Right.
And I didn't realize how, and that's the other, you never know till you get into a project how much the construction costs, or that you found out that the plumbing was bad, that this needed. So then maybe I find somebody that's willing to give me advice, but maybe they're saying, hey, you know what, I'd be willing to invest in this. What I'll do is I'll bring my expertise, and what my attitude is a half a loaf is better than no loaf. So there's another way.
Half a loaf. Yeah, don't be greedy. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Bob, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. Bob, if somebody's trying to get tax increment financing, if they're looking for consultant work, are you still offering that in multiple states? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, the best way is I go to my website, which is MR Capital Advisors .com, and that's an easy way to get a hold of me, because I've got a page on the last that says put in your information, and it'll go straight to me.
Cool. And you consult in multiple states, cities, and everything like that?
Yeah.
Cool. And one interesting fact about you is you spend half of your time in Kansas City and the other half
in St. Petersburg, Florida.
So we're going to have that in common pretty soon, right?
I love that area. It's the Gulf side's the best side, but unless the hurricane takes it out. But it's a beautiful place. My wife and I have paid our stripes, and we continue to work because we like it, and I love real estate. So yeah, we're there from January to usually Memorial Day.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, guys. If you enjoyed this program, make sure that you share it with a friend. Make sure you give us a 5-star review. Make sure you subscribe. And no matter what you're doing right now, make sure you get positive and start investing in yourself. Start investing in real estate. Nothing happens unless you take action. And if you don't take action, nothing happens. So do us a favor, take action, hit that subscribe button, hit that 5-star review button, and schedule a call with our team and get serious about investing in real estate. Peace. Are you interested in investing in real estate, but you don't feel like you got the time to take a coaching program? I get it, right? You're busy, you're making money, and that's okay, but you want to invest with me because you're like, Troy, I like what you do. I see what you're doing. You're a real deal. Yes, I am. I'm an average Joe. I worked at Burger King. I worked at Red Robin. I started investing in real estate, and I started from absolutely nothing, and I will take you along with my journey, and you can get all the benefits, but you got to be an accredited investor. If you want to invest with me and you want to be a part of something great and you don't have the time, guess what? We're launching a fund that you can be a part of, but you got to be an accredited investor. And if you want to find out more about what that looks like, all you got to do is click the link and we'll show you exactly what that looks like. And guess what? If you're not an accredited investor, then you may down the road be an accredited investor. So definitely learn what that's all about and enjoy the podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.